Welcome to Chat DPS, where this week we start off with a story about Ingram Micro. Take a look as US officials are addressing allegations that a ransom negotiator was skimming off the top, before taking a hard look at the Qantas story, as we've put up on LinkedIn a couple of times in the last week. So, hello, Robert, and welcome back from your big jollies, and hopefully the jet lag's wearing thin by now. Robert, the first story is Ingram Micro outage, which has been allegedly caused by SafePay, a SafePay ransomware attack. This is a story from the Bleeping Computer, 5th of the 7th, so pretty much up to date. Ingram Micro is one of the world's largest business-to-business technology distributors and service providers, offering a range of solutions, including hardware, software, cloud offerings, logistics, and training to resellers, and managed services providers worldwide. Since Thursday, that's last Thursday, Ingram Micro's website and online ordering systems have been down, and the company has not been disclosing the cause of the issues. The ransom note, which was seen and witnessed by Bleeping Computer, is associated with SafePay ransomware operation, which has become one of the most active operations in 2025. Sources have told Bleeping Computer that it believes that the threat actors breached Ingram Micro through Global Protect VPN platform. So more on that, I guess. Initial thoughts, Robert. Sorry.
I mean, I guess it's another in a long line of major data breaches. Another ransomware gang has emerged into more recent prominence. I think the tracking on this is they started to become quite active probably late last year. Their MO seems to be that they steal VPN or RDP, so remote protocols credentials, remote desktop protocol credentials. So that seems to be the way that they get into organizations. And so I suppose that the initial line of defense is to look at your VPN and RDP privileges and how they're set up, and do they have MFA on them and that sort of thing. So there's a first line of defense to be thinking about. But yeah, it's another gang, it's another day, it's another gang, it's another data breach. So it's obviously fairly significant. But while ransomware continues to be incredibly lucrative, these gangs will appear, they'll organize, and doesn't take long for them to become incredibly effective.
Yeah, I guess the interesting thing for me was the fact that if this happened last week in the middle of the week, sort of people weren't able to access systems. Although the article does make clear the fact that sort of like standard, sort of like Office type applications, the Microsoft suite of products, for instance, are all unblemished. They've kind of gotten out of jail free this time around. But it's all of the the finance and the ordering and all the other bits and pieces, the distribution piece. But here again, it looks like I'm not sure if it's a third party attack or whether it's just like the VPN seems to be the place to go. So networking, endpoint protection are all good, which is what basically Trend Micro do, right? They do endpoint protection and they do VPN stuff, amongst other things. But those are the primary kind of things. Does this mean to say that we really should be looking a little bit further than just network and desktop protection?
Yeah, I think so. I think all the focus tends to be on the endpoint and trying to protect and create some sort of layers of defense. And I think what we see is that these groups are always going to find a way around, and whether it's through stolen credentials, often we see issues with using social engineering to compromise individuals, because often it's the human factor that's the weakest point of all. And so I think we need to have a shift in mentality, a shift in culture, a shift in discussions, and really be thinking about the data and thinking about the information that's being held, and think about ways to protect that better instead of thinking about these layers and this endpoint detection stuff. Because if they breach your layers, your network, if you've really done a great job in terms of protecting the data, then there's not much they can do, particularly in terms of extorting you for information they get hold of. So they may be able to affect certain systems, and then obviously you need some strategies around putting partitions around your network to try and put some air gaps between different systems. But when it comes to the crown jewels, I think we need to have this different sort of discussion about there's well-known ways of encrypting data. We really need to be focusing on how do we protect those crown jewels better, rather than just thinking about endpoint.
Yeah, that's so true, and I guess it's going to come up again very, very soon.
Yes, yeah, pretty much
Yeah.
any discussion around data breach, I think we're going to come to this kind of similar conclusion.
Yeah, that's true. So anyway, moving on, the US probes whether a negotiator took a slice of hacker payments. Now then, this is a story that's been put out by Bloomberg, and the article alleges that law enforcement officials are investigating a former Digital Mint employee who allegedly struck deals with hackers to profit from extortion payments during ransomware attacks. Digital Mint is cooperating with the investigation, which is not targeting the company, and that company has terminated the employee's contract. The company claims to have acted swiftly to protect its clients. The investigation highlights concerns about the cottage industry. I was quite amused by a cottage industry of ransomware
Mm.
negotiators
Mm.
who may have incentives to drive up extortion payments, and raises questions about the ethics of paying hackers during ransomware attacks. Coming from me on this, I mean, sure, it's a cottage industry if you consider that a cottage industry is now, if it were a country, the third largest economy in the world.
Hmm.
I mean, it just
Yeah.
seems, but I mean, obviously, this easy access to cash, easy access to wealth creation, and what have you, um, it's eking through the other side. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. So clearly there's a rogue employee involved here, but this idea of outsourcing the negotiation. So you've suffered a data breach, you've had this ransomware attack, and then you've outsourced the negotiation to this particular digital mint organization, and he can kind of understand it, because a lot of organizations really don't know where to turn when they've suffered a ransomware attack like this. And whilst I think these ransomware gangs can be quite sophisticated in terms of giving instructions about how to pay a ransomware in Bitcoin or whatever it might be, I can understand getting so-called experts involved to help with that. I mean, I know, and you probably had similar examples locally. There are plenty of well-respected forensic organizations who will help you with a data breach and give you advice around next steps. And that will even go to the extent of, if you're going to pay a ransom, what's the likelihood you will be breaching AML, CTF laws in Australia by
Yeah.
inadvertently paying funds to, say, a nation state, which might breach those laws. And what these experts can actually do some analysis, do some research on these hackers, and let what the likelihood is of, well, one you're getting your data back, that you won't be double extorted, and the likelihood of actually breaching those sorts of laws. So there is something to say for engaging experts, but I guess it comes down to transparency. So clearly there was a lack of transparency in terms of the deals that were being done, and the money that was being paid to these gangs. So I guess the key thing is, if you are going to outsource, you need to have full transparency over that process.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably worth. I mean, Digital Mint, we've named them, sort of like up front, but it's actually worth noting that the U.S. Justice Department have confirmed that they're investigating an individual and not the company.
That's right.
On its website, Digital Mint says that it specializes in securing the handling of ransomware incidents, and that it has experience of over 2,000 such attacks since 2017. There was an interesting comment that was made by Alan Lisker, who's a threat analyst from Recorded Future, and the quote is quite interesting in that it says, "At best, a payment serves to improve the operations of the ransomware group, and at worst, it may lead to additional attacks because an organization will be identified as one that is willing to pay."
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
and that's the double
Interesting.
extortion point. Yeah, that's the double extortion
Double
point. So
extortion
yeah,
point. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that it is an interesting sort of like spin on things, and there is a bit of a development in terms of how that's going to be going. But it's a story that we
Mm.
can watch as we go through. Now,
Yeah.
finally, we're having a look at the Qantas story. Now, then obviously this has been covered in multiple points of the media since last week. I think I put up a point last week, sort of stating that, I felt that the Qantas had actually dealt with this relatively responsibly, had a plan and executed against that plan. However, as the week has gone on, what we've begun to realize is that there is the good, there's the bad and the ugly that go alongside with this as well. And so the first point is they were hacked, and I'm not being funny or anything, but that's not a good thing, right? It's just not a good thing. The
Yeah,
manner in
that's all
which
right.
they dealt with it
Mm.
was reasonable.
Mhm.
um, they weren't treating people like they were stupid. They tried to come out on the front foot. They had media alerts. They did individual, sort of email and through the app, sort of updates around what was actually happening at the time. And they expressed the fact that they were very sorry for it. They expressed an apology,
Mhm.
and said that they were working with outside bodies. They were doing a range of different things, which is fantastic. However, the media points have been very much along the lines of, this is wearing really thin now. And why are these attacks actually continuing to go on? And I guess the questions, I mean, I've got a customer, big law firm, and they were approached by their customers who can only assume, they're the larger end of town corporate entities. What are you doing to look after our data? And that law firm has taken this really seriously and put in some really, sort of top grade encryption, key management, sort of like systems that enable them to protect their customers' data. They take this quite seriously because what we've got to remember, of course, is that every time somebody goes and takes your data from somebody else, it's somebody else that's looking after your data, and you're really the injured party. So they're just custodians of that data, I guess. And we're continuing to see this vortex of, we're looking after the network, we're looking after endpoint. This is a third party breach, again, through a call center.
Yep.
So, we could,
Overseas, uh, uh, overseas call center. Yeah.
yeah, overseas call center, even then, data sovereignty comes into play. Well, my question is when are we going to start here in Australia taking the protection of data seriously? If you've got the network covered, so say if you've got the sort of endpoint protected, why aren't we looking at it? Is it because it's not mandated?
Well, it is mandated. It's the Privacy
Oh,
Act.
oh,
We remember that. Yeah. And
that old chestnut.
the problem is that the enforcement just isn't there. And we've talked about this before. So let's keep banging the drum, despite the fact that the maximum penalty was increased to a minimum of $50 million for a serious breach of data. And we've had so while Optus and Medibank missed out on that one, Latitude would be caught by it, and any subsequent breaches to that. We haven't seen the enforcement come through. So I mentioned Optus and Medibank. We still haven't seen the repercussions of that. Latitude, who you'd expect to cop a significant fine, still waiting on that one. And now we're getting into nearly 3 years from when these breaches happened. So the regulators who are involved in investigating this, and particularly the OAIC, just do not have the resources to turn around these investigations quickly enough and slap a significant fine on these organizations, which is meaningful. And then secondly, there's no real teeth within, say, the Corporations Act to go after the directors and officers and make them accountable. So without accountability, without significant penalization, we're really not seeing anything that's going to shift the dial when it comes to doing something different, because we need to do something different. As I said with the first story, there's always going to be these ransomware gangs. It's too lucrative, not to have them. So you may shut one down, another one will reappear. It's like trying to cut off the heads of a hydra. So there's always going to be these gangs. There's always going to be data breaches. You can't just have layers of defense, because there's always going to be weak points. There's always going to be third party supply chain risk, and a little bit like the story that you mentioned about one of your clients. An organization like Qantas really needs to be a lot tougher with their third parties, and they have to say within the contract between them, you need to have encryption software. There needs to be much stronger control over those third parties. There needs to be much stronger control within the organization itself in terms of what are they doing with this information? What are they doing with people's personal information? Can they do something other than just focus on putting some more layers of defense in? Can they focus on things like encryption technology? So we need to shift that discussion, because, like you say, we're all getting sick and tired of these data breaches, of all this information getting shared. And on the one hand, there's no consequences, or the consequences take so long that people almost forget about it. But we also need to have a different conversation about how we protect this data.
I think yes, absolutely. I mean, there's some other stats that have come out which are kind of interesting. So the Australian Signals Directorate, which is a federal government intelligence agency, responded to over 1,100 cyber security incidents and 36,700 hotline calls in 23-24, which was a 12% jump on the previous year. Data breach notifications spiked 15% in the second half of 2024. I think that, we're also seeing stories about healthcare remains the most targeted industry, with 102 reported breaches in the latter half of last year. The retention of data is at the forefront of the debate, but encryption services are available as part of an overarching solution. We've got to get smarter. We've just got to get smarter about how we go about doing this. And it just seems to me that people are looking and going, no, it's just extra budget.
Well, yeah, and as I keep saying, so if people are not willing to change voluntarily, then the big stick needs to come down on certain organizations and certain individuals. I mean, how else is this discussion going to change? So, regulators, please bring the big stick down on some of these organizations, because
because it is our data at the end of the day. Yeah, I mean, as it's our data. It's always us. They're responsible for being custodians for it. We're accountable by the fact that we've actually got to go out and do all the bits and pieces to change passwords and do all the other bits and pieces that are incumbent upon us.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's worth talking about a little bit is the crisis management side of it. So, on the one hand, initially Qantas are very proactive in terms of the communications, but it was interesting to see some criticisms in the media, and they were saying, well, the CEO was overseas when this occurred, and they weren't there to front the cameras. And it took them a couple of days before they were able to make a statement in front of the camera. So, while there was certainly some proactive written communications, there's always lessons to be learned, and you sort of wonder, in that case, with the CEO overseas, she would have had a second in command, whether that was the chair, whether that was a CEO or somebody else like that, and perhaps in hindsight, they would probably have got them to front the cameras, pretty much immediately to be able to answer questions to the media. So there's always things to improve, and like I say, Qantas are probably more proactive than some other organizations that we've seen suffer a major data breach recently. But maybe there's other things they could have done differently.
Sure. And this one's going to play out for a little while, I'm sure. But look, thanks ever so much for your input this week. That was Chat DPS. Looking forward to catching up with you very soon.
Thanks, Nick.